and welcome to another episode of Two Old Psychologists Talking About Stuff. We've arbitrarily decided this is going to be the end of season 2, and we're going to do something a little bit different going forward. So stay tuned for some exciting announcements towards the end of this episode. But enough of that for now. Hi, Ray.
Hello, Rich. Nice to see you.
How are you, my friend?
Very well, thank you. Just recovering from a very pleasant little break away and getting back into the heart of the work. And what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm enjoying the summer. With some of these lighter evenings, they are good for me. Me and lighter evenings play well together.
Excellent.
So we're going to talk about this. It's a very acty thing of this concept of fusion and diffusion, which we will talk about a bit later on. But before we get into that, what's been going on since we last spoke? What have you noticed?
Well, funnily enough, it pulls together both my previous comment and yours. As I say, lucky enough to have just been on holiday for a little while. And I was in Lisbon, in Portugal, a place I've never been to before. Recommend it if people haven't visited. The thing I noticed was the place I was staying overlooked one of the many, many kind of open squares in that city. And one of the things I noticed was how well used those squares were, including at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, but sort of in a pleasant way. You know, people were just hanging out, chatting. There wasn't particularly rowdiness. There was no hassle going on. Little sort of places selling soft drinks as much as alcoholic, even open at that time. And they're just this very civilized late night open air culture, which kind of made me think you don't see that as much in a lot of places in the UK. And I wonder whether actually part of that is the weather. You know, there's not many times of year when you wouldn't be freezing or being rained on persistently if you're out in the middle of the night. But it was very striking.
It's definitely a cultural thing, isn't it? Probably the weather does play a big part. I was just thinking if I hear voices out in the street 2 o'clock in the morning in the UK, I'm reaching for my shotgun.
More flags are being put up on the lampposts.
Do you know what as well? This isn't going to be my thing, but like what I've noticed is how often when I ask you what you've noticed, you talk about your exploits in a foreign country.
Is that right?
I think if we look back over the episodes, there's quite a number where you've been discussing shenanigans overseas.
Either that or mushrooms.
Yes, either that or mushrooms, yeah.
And I was about to mention there is an absolutely superb mushroom-only restaurant in Lisbon. But I thought, no, you go on too much about mushrooms. Stop with the mushrooms already.
Okay, go on then. Briefly, what did you have?
What did I have? All of it was mushroomy goodness. But I suppose the real star dish was the desserts, including mushroom ice cream and a kind of creme brulee that was infused with truffles. They were quite memorable dishes, definitely pleasant. I can see why you don't normally infuse creme brulee with truffle, in fairness, but I'm glad to have experienced it.
Can you see why you don't normally have mushroom ice cream?
Less so. Actually, that worked remarkably well. In a world where things like salted caramel ice cream exist, I can see why certain kinds of mushroom ice cream could exist. Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's the next big thing.
This is, I mean, I've tried really hard to put this to bed, but you just keep bringing it back, don't you?
Keeps coming
back. It's going to be a lifelong thing, I think, with you.
Well, and afterwards, decomposition is very, very mushroom intensive. What about yourself, Rich?
So in anticipation of our arbitrary end to season 2 and the exciting things that we're going to announce at the end of the episode, I've just been looking back at the statistics. So It's with great pleasure that I can say that we're just on the cusp of 15,000 downloads, which is something I never thought we would achieve in my wildest dreams. So that's nice. It's probably, I wonder if there's people out there who think, well, these two blokes have written books, they've got a massive reach, but that's probably more sales than all of our books combined, right?
Yeah.
Academic books don't sell in great quantities, do they? So that's cool, right?
That's brilliant. I don't think I had a number in my head, but that's bigger than whatever number I didn't have.
If we're looking back over season 2, what do you reckon are our top 3 episodes? What do you think's the most popular? Let's start there.
I think maybe one of our The World is Going to Rack and Ruin episodes.
Almost. Yeah, close, but no cigar. That was 4th.
All right. The free will marathon?
No. I mean, I look back at that as one of our best ones, but no, that wasn't.
But the very definition of like success by download is you have to have heard it to realize how good it is. So actually, the fact that fewer of it was downloaded isn't a reflection of the quality of the episode.
No, that's true. In ascending order, so our top 3 episodes have been the one on acceptance, that comes in at number 3, how acceptance can set you free. And then at number 2, why it's important to talk about death.
Hey. That pleases me. You know my biases.
And a runaway leader actually now is who am I and what is the self?
Oh.
Seems like lots of people want to answer that question. Who am I? So interesting.
Well, that's very heartening, isn't it? I mean, I think one of the things is that both sort of in a general sense, it's kind of an interesting question. And also for those people who are a bit more interested in this psychology approach, this ACT, it's one of the stickier points. So I do know a few people have pointed others to that podcast as a kind of, you might understand it a bit better once you've listened to that. So maybe that's where we're picking up some listeners.
Oh, nice. Okay. Our typical listener is a female in the range between 45 and 59 and British.
How do we know that?
Wow. Certain platforms give you a big breakdown.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how they know that. I mean, that's the slightly sinister thing, but yeah, the biggest kind of bits of demographic data sort of show up those areas. Yeah. After the UK, which is probably, it's kind of obvious, I guess, why we would be bigger in the UK. It's other English-speaking countries, so US, Australia, Canada, and then Norway, Colombia. Wasn't expecting that. Singapore, Romania, New Zealand, France. That's our top 10.
Excellent. I feel very international now. You see, me going on about international trips, it's all part of the profile of the show.
And the other thing about our English 40, 50-something female listener is that she has an iPhone.
Is that right?
By far the most popular place to find us is Apple Podcasts.
This is a whole new world of data to me.
Exciting, isn't it?
But still, it's reinforcement for doing this thing. You and I would happily sit down over a coffee or whatever and ramble on like this anyway, but formally going to the effort of making this a podcast, good reinforcement that there are actually some people who listen to it.
If you can entertain 15,000 people in the process, then more's the better. Yeah. Okay, then moving on. So ACT has this concept. Well, it has a word that I don't think is in a dictionary anywhere. Defusion. So it's not the same as like diffusion, which I believe is something to do with gas. It's not the same as like defusing a bomb. There's this word defusion, which relates to the idea of fusion. So if fusion with thoughts, so getting so close to your thoughts that you can't see the wood for the trees, if that's identified as a sort of a problem, then defusion is kind of where we would like a client to get to. So an ability to kind of stand back from thought. So briefly, that's the headlines. So what would you say, Ray? Like if someone was asking you about what fusion is, how would you go about trying to navigate that particular question?
Well, I guess I'd start with possibly why that word's being used. So if you think of two physical substances being fused together, they're not just sort of sitting next to each other. They're not just leaning on each other. It's like they've become absolutely enmeshed. And I think that's possibly the metaphor, we've talked a lot about metaphors before, that's been used to say this is when our awareness and our understanding of the world has got really enmeshed with specific, particularly thoughts, to the extent that you can't tell where your experience of the world and thoughts that you are having, where one ends and the other one begins. And that gets us into trouble in some ways, as well as often not getting us into trouble. There's loads of ways in which this is absolutely, it's not just fine, it's how we need to work. But sometimes it trips us up.
I don't know why, but when I'm ever trying to explain this, I often think of people that get anxious in social situations. So to illustrate the point you just made there. So if I were to invite someone with that kind of anxiety into a room full of people, it is very unlikely that their experience is going to be walking into just a room full of people, right? That their experience is going to be walking into a room full of people who are likely to criticize them, reject them, judge them in some way.
Mm.
And so they've kind of overlaid their thoughts about this situation onto the situation in a way that they're probably not aware of and can't even control. But it's like, as you say there, that like reality, I mean, this is a whole probably separate conversation about what's reality, but what's actually going on and our thoughts about what's actually going on are kind of so similar that it's hard to tell them apart. I guess that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, which it has to be. We don't probably have much direct contact with lots of aspects of whatever is going on around us, other than via our senses and our processing systems. So, of course, to a large extent, there's going to be that very close connection. However, the concept that there might be a difference between a thing and the thought of a thing is something we can lose in the heat of the moment.
That's a nice way to put it. I think the other thing that's important to say, this is completely a natural process, right? This is just normal kind of learning behavior, which we'll go on to describe in a little while. I think it would be helpful to do that. And it's not all bad, right? So,
Oh.
like, I could say that I'm quite fused with the idea that my name is Rich. And it doesn't cause me any problems. And indeed, it would cause me problems, and it would cause you problems if every time you asked me what my name was, I said something else. I said something different, Like if that wasn't stable and rigid, that would be problematic. It's actually helpful for me to have this kind of label for me to refer to myself as, and for other people to refer to me as. Because when, you're in a group of friends and someone talks about Rich, you know they're talking about me.
Yeah.
And so me being kind of totally convinced of that idea and unable to see any separation between me and my name, like that's not actually a bad thing. It doesn't cause me any problems. So it wouldn't be a target for a therapist, right?
Yeah. What's our evidence for that is that it doesn't cause you any problems.
The fact that ACT folk are so interested in this concept of fusion with thoughts, like this inability to kind of separate yourself from the thought that you're having, or an inability to separate a thing from the thought you're having about it, suggests that in large part we're interested in it because it's problematic. What would be an example of kind of problematic fusion then? So a type of fusion that would be of interest to a therapist because it's causing someone some difficulty.
I suppose if somebody had poor experience of relationships, so, relationships tended not to have worked out very well for them in the past, and they, not entirely surprisingly, arrive at the thought, I'm not very good at relationships, then being fused with that thought changes that as it's an observation. It might have been accurate so far, not necessarily always accurate. I can still go ahead and attempt to have relationships. I might be able to learn how to have relationships better. That's different from I am bad at relationships just being absolutely the way the world is. It's the filter through which you see the world. And having made that realization and fused with it, then actually each beginning of a relationship is already colored by that thought and people beginning to look for all the signs that it's not going to work. Because it never works because, as already proved, I'm bad at relationships and therefore looking for things to go wrong, reacting badly to stuff, and often actually sort of bringing about the very thing that the person predicted.
So just to pick that apart, that chimes with the way I would think about it, and the things that are often written about fusion, if you look at ACT literature, would be, I think there's a few things in there. So one is that almost like the literality kind of aspect. So almost like believing that the thought just represents how things actually are in the physical universe. So yeah, I'm just bad at relationships, full stop, that's it, the end. There's the behavioral impact of it in that if you allow I'm bad at relationships to kind of run the show, then it's going to limit your behavioral repertoire. There's probably all sorts of things that you wouldn't do as a consequence. So, you might meet someone that you're attracted to, but you might not declare that or might not attempt to get to know them better. You might shy away if somebody, approaches you for a relationship. You kind of hide away. You might just avoid going out entirely and avoid contact with other people. So it has a kind of unhelpful sort of repertoire narrowing impact. And then it also could form the basis for a bunch of unhelpful rules which are designed to keep the discomfort that's brought around by that thought at arm's length. So I can't think off the top of my head what those rules might be, but I can imagine that someone might organise their life in such a way that I'm bad at relationships never kind of comes to haunt them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't put yourself in a position that makes you vulnerable. Get out of a relationship at the first sign of trouble because it'll only hurt more when it's later, and it will hurt more later because I am bad at relationships. So yeah, you could set up a set of rules that then govern the behavior in a manner that aims to reduce the distress or some predicted negative outcome, but unfortunately denies you the possibility of the positive outcomes that you most craved.
Sure. I'll put you on the spot, and I'm willing to jump into this too. Do you have a thing that you think you're fused with in an unhelpful way? So like a thought that visits you regularly that you just can't quite seem to shake off and feels like it's just true?
Well, part of the problem is, of course, I'm less likely to spot them if I'm really fused to them. That's part of the work, isn't it? Yeah, I'll never get through this. Not in some big emotional sense, but if I'm involved in a long piece of work, like preparing a batch of teaching or writing something, I've done that many, many, many times over the decades. Always got to the end of it. Yet the thought of, I'll never get through this, I'll never get to the end of this piece of work, shows up. And it still shows up. And it has a predictable effect at times on my mood and my motivation, my tendency to get distracted and do something else. Even though I cognitively know it to be untrue. I don't need anybody to prove to me that it's untrue. I know it's untrue. Yet it still shows up. And when it shows up, I tend not to question it in that moment. And it affects me, as I say, sort of emotionally and behaviorally.
Even though it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny?
Not for 1 second. Yeah, that's the distinction, isn't it? We can know something isn't true. It still really affects us.
Yeah. I think that's it. It's interesting. It doesn't work on radio, but like, it's like, it's not true up here.
As you touch your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel like it's true in here. Touches hard.
Yeah.
So, so I said I'd join in. So I have a thing, and I think this is probably quite common. I don't think I'm the only one. But it's something like I'm a fraud. Right? I don't deserve to be someone's therapist. I don't deserve to be teaching other people how to be therapists. I shouldn't be writing about any of this. And who on earth is listening to this podcast? It's impervious to empirical data. Like I've had good feedback from clients. I've had good feedback from the people that I've taught, and just read a bunch of numbers about people listening to the podcast. Sort of doesn't make any difference, right? There's this kind of part of me that always thinks, any minute now, I'm going to get rumbled, and I'm going to be just shown up for the total fraud that I am, and it's a constant companion. It's weird.
Yeah. And what's interesting is when you voice that, and obviously that's normally an internal thing that you're carrying, it's sort of an unusual set of circumstances that you're sharing this. The kind of the natural response from another person who knows your work and knows you as a person is to argue, is try to convince you you're wrong about that, because clearly that statement is wrong. However, of course, if I start telling you all the reasons why that's not true, what's your mind going to do? Your mind's going to say, yeah, but what about? and it's going to actually dig in further. And this is part of the origin of the ACT approach to thinking, is the recognition that, yes, absolutely, some difficult and troublesome thoughts, we can use reasoning to reduce their grip on people or to introduce new ideas a person hasn't thought of in a very classic kind of cognitive therapy way. And sometimes that's massively helpful. But very often, these entrenched long-term ones, the more an external person argues with them, the more you will entrench. And the more you try and argue from the inside, the more that thought will entrench and come back at you with, yeah, but. Which is one of the reasons why we have this emphasis on defusion rather than trying to argue them out of existence.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like if you were to try and argue with me now about the fraud thing, I'd be armed to the teeth with evidence as to why it was true.
Yeah.
Despite, the obvious problems with any argument I could put forward. But there's a very it's hard to describe it, like a felt sense of it. Like at any moment where perhaps I've hit a difficult patch with a client, in the middle of a session, it's like, oh, here it comes. Or if I get asked a really difficult question in a training that I'm giving, that it's so easy for that to come to the surface. And it's like, there it is, here it is again. Told you, it was only a matter of time. You were going to get found out.
Aha. The interesting thing in the example that each of us gave was we've given an example, and I can see why we chose these to illustrate this. We've both chosen things that sort of evidentially probably aren't true. As you've said, you've got a stack of evidence that suggests you're at least a good enough therapist and trainer, probably rather more than that. And I've got evidence that I do eventually get through these long pieces of work. And very often when we talk about fusion and defusion, we end up talking about things that evidentially probably aren't true. Of course, what's interesting in this concept that's different to some other areas of psychology is you can be fused and defused with thoughts that accurately reflect the state of the world outside. They are not that reality, but they are accurate statements of the world outside. And to be able to hold those in a similarly diffused manner is a different experience, but it's one sometimes people don't realize it's as true for that. So to give an example, and I'm sorry, as ever, I'm going back to sort of depressing things about bereavement and death, but the thought, this illness is not treatable, I will die soon, right? For some people, that is a literal truth. Okay, so this is the difference between truth and reality in the way we talk about it here. It's a truth in the sense that it corresponds to what is probably going on in the world and in the person's body. And all the medical team agree to it, all the scans agree, everybody's in agreement. So in that sense, it's true. When a person's lying awake at 3:00 in the morning, and this is the thought that's going through their head and through their head and through their head and through their head, at that moment, the thought, I will die soon, is probably still true in the usual sense of the word true. But this is not the moment of dying. Having the thought is not the thing that the thought refers to. So at that 3:00 moment, although the thought is true in the usual sense of the word, it is not what's actually going on in this moment. And although we can't change the fact that death will be coming, we might be able to change something about how you deal with that thought. Because the thought may be true, but it's not reality. This is not really happening in this moment. The thought is not the thing. In this case, the thought is not the death.
Yeah, nice.
So we can fuse and defuse with real and important thoughts as well as thoughts that probably are not factually truthful.
This is really interesting and something that, if I'm not careful, this could drag me off down a complete sidebar conversation. But I think this is one of the reasons I've struggled with certain aspects of traditional cognitive therapy, because if something kind of undesirable occurs in someone's mind, pretty much the only tool I was given to deal with that was to do some kind of challenge, like sort of where's the evidence kind of thing. But it seemed to me that there were many thoughts that people became unhelpfully kind of enmeshed with or fused, when you use that language, were actually true in the sense that they corresponded with reality. So I always remember, one of the people who had a really big influence on my career was a guy called Windy Dryden, who's prolific kind of author on cognitive behavior therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, etc., etc. And I remember him talking about somebody could say something like, "I'm a terrible mother." And it might kind of be true, right? Like in terms of the evidence of their behavior and the outcomes for their children. And so he was kind of saying, well, it's not really helpful to just go in and try and challenge that. But like, well,
Mhm.
but you do, you did buy them some food
Yeah.
once, that's not really that helpful. And it strikes me there's a lot of situations where just trying to challenge unwelcome thoughts doesn't quite cut the mustard. I don't wanna knock it entirely, like, I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
situations where if we have unwelcome thoughts, just sort of checking in, like, "Is that really the case? Is that actually happening? Is there another interpretation?" I think that's fine, but what sort of occurred to me when you were talking there was if I've got 6 months to live and I'm lying awake every night with that thought running around my head, it's kinda unhelpful, right? Like, I'm not gonna live a great 6 months. And, we could argue I'm not gonna have a great 6 months anyway, but there's probably a better or worse version of
Yeah.
that 6 months. And if you're just completely consumed by that thought the whole time, that's gonna be the worser of the options.
Yeah. Introducing the possibility of accepting the thought is present
Yeah.
and disengaging from the ever so natural urge to dispute is
Mm.
kind of often that first step, isn't it? Is to say, "Oh, look what's shown up again. Oh,
Yeah.
here's this thought again." And then begin to ask some of the questions we're probably gonna come on to as alternative ways of responding to the fact that the thought has shown up rather than, "Please let me try and argue it out of existence." Because, as you say, sometimes you do need to check in with it, and either individually within us or in a therapy context, sometimes people have genuinely it's never occurred to them that something else might be possible. So encouraging them to just have a little look around and think whether there might be counterexamples and things, they might never have done it. And so it's really helpful to do that. But most of the time, we are stuck with these thoughts that keep showing up despite the evidence. And indeed, as we've said before, entrench more and more the more counter evidence you try and find.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels important to say, like, I've come across ACT therapists who are very tribal about ACT and just think that anything that isn't ACT is kind of like the devil's work, and they are really against any form of kind of, yeah, cognitive restructuring, as it's called in the trade. So like thought
Challenge, yeah.
challenging or, thought review. I think that hardcore position is unhelpful, right? Because as you suggest, there's all sorts of reasons why somebody might do that and it might find it helpful. Could we do a little sort of welcome to the human race moment? Because I'm thinking like there might well be people listening here who are thinking, well, I have this thought and it just won't go away. And, am I crazy? Like, am I doing something wrong? Like, this is just a very natural thing, isn't it? And
Mhm.
happens for a bunch of reasons that we could sort of geek out about just for, a minute or two.
Mm.
First thing that occurs to me, and we probably covered this in one of our earlier episodes way back, but is that we, as humans, we have this very symbolic style of learning, don't we? So if when you're a little kid and you're being taught to speak, people will do things like perhaps, hold up an apple and they will say, "Hey, this is an apple." And so you are taught to pair the object apple with the sound apple. And then the two things just become kind of synonymous. And then that just repeats and repeats and repeats for every single object you can think of. And, the kids reach that wonderful age where their vocabulary massively expands. I don't know how many words it is a day, but it's this huge number. And so that's the world that, from being a very small infant, that's the world you live in, where things are symbolically represented by words. And so it's quite a natural phenomenon, and it becomes a two-way street, doesn't it? That the word apple and the sound apple are kind of the same thing.
Mm. And evoke some concept of sweet, fleshy fruit that's good to eat. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you get kind of helpful and unhelpful consequences of that. So, like if I say to you, "Hey Ray, could you get me an apple?"
Uh-huh.
Like I don't have to mime it. I don't have to no actual apples are involved in that, right?
Yeah.
And that's helpful because if I just say, "Oh, can you get me an apple?" You know what I want. You probably know where to get it. It's on the corner of a road in Herefordshire, isn't it?
On the outside bend as it rolls off the back of a tractor. Yeah.
But
Bend
that's easy,
apples.
right? That sort of shorthand of having a sound that I can make to represent the apple just makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, Yet there's a downside in the sense that I think you alluded to it earlier, that because the symbol carries the same kind of functions as the actual thing, let's have another word. Like I could think of the word interview, and it might carry some of the sort of anxious functions of an actual interview. So that what that does is it enables me to think, I've got that interview next week, and get really anxious now about a thing that I'm not even experiencing.
Yeah. Your body prepares yourself in its kind of ancient, evolved, and probably for that context, unhelpful way of raising your heart rate and your blood pressure and make you sweat a bit, which, yeah, isn't that great in a real interview, but certainly is of no use whatsoever a week in advance. And yet there it is because of that word interview.
Yeah. Strikes me it's like the basis of all advertising, right? That you don't have to show people the thing. You can just talk about the thing, or you can have slogans that evoke the thing.
Yeah, an individual word.
Another phrase I just wanted to kind of mention was, again, it's Mentors Night, I think. So Yvonne Barnes-Holmes, who's someone who is a kind of world-leading researcher in relational frame theory, once said about this whole business of kind of relating things together, that it starts simple. So, this is an apple. It gets complex. So we might have complex relations like, yeah, Jeffrey is my aunt's mother's brother, which involves quite a few leaps there. And then it gets personal. So I am worthless. So labeling myself as worthless is exactly the same mechanism as labeling the apple with the sound apple. It's nothing, there's nothing weird going on here. It's just basic verbal learning behavior again, but the ramifications of it are kind of much bigger and sort of deeper and scarier.
Yeah. So we have this kind of really flexible, we'd argue for a given use of the word language-based way of representing the world in our heads that enables us to do all these phenomenal abstract things without showing each other apples, just using the language, reasoning, inferring, predicting, that works so well. And yeah, absolutely takes us down these really unhealthy, at times, blind alleys and trips us up.
So what do we do about it then? Because I'm organised, prepared a little kind of list of categories, I suppose, of defusion exercises or things that one can do to help when you feel like you've been really hijacked by thought and you can't separate yourself from it. So there's two categories we're going to deal with fairly quickly, because there's a third category that I think is sort of where a lot of the action really is. So the first one is that you can just play with the language, right, to change the language parameters. I think you're going to talk about lemons any second, are you?
I can indeed. Let's try this out. Let's do an example. So, Rich, you're going to take the word lemon. When I say lemon, what's your reaction to that word lemon?
I immediately wanted to do a kind of like face, like sucking a lemon face. Like there's something about the sort of tartness of a lemon that immediately came to mind.
Yeah, okay. And your mind could have taken you different ways. It could have gone for the colour, but it went for that set of sounds, which we have a shared understanding through you sharing the English language, represents that particular citrus fruit. And you've gone to that slice of it, and particularly the taste of it. Okay, so just really stay with lemon in the sense that you're going after it. You said tart makes you pull a face. Really stay with that and let that feeling happen within you. And what's it feel like? It's a real shame people can't see the face you just pulled. What's it like in your mouth?
Yeah, it's kind of acidic. Yeah.
There is no lemon present. You haven't just sucked a sweet, you haven't just taken some lemon juice or something. You went from lemons not being anything remotely present, no taste of it, and I made a noise with my mouth that had a shape that meant something shared to us because of a shared language. And you began to react to that noise the same way, albeit to a slightly lesser extent, than you would have done to the real thing that word
But I actually want to
represents.
reach for my drink now. I've got a
Okay, well,
visceral
let's
sense of I'd quite like to have a drink because I want to sort of
excellent.
refresh my mouth from that acidic kind
Okay.
of taste.
And I'm going to invite you not to for the moment. And just kind of let that one be
Sadist.
there. Just imagine what it would be like, to have that swoosh of cold, clean water to get rid of it. But we're not going to do that right at the moment. We're going to do something else. We rather than either physically intervene by putting water in your mouth or getting you to do some visualization of what water might be like, we're just going to stay at the level of word. And what I want you to do now is I want you to say the word lemon while still holding that feeling in your mouth. So just say the word lemon.
Lemon.
Okay. And there it is with that feeling. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to do something else. I'm going to get you to repeat the word lemon, and we're going to repeat it quite quickly together, and we're going to repeat it quite a few times. Okay, so let's do this together. Ready, steady, go. Lemon, lemon,
Lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon,
lemon. Keep
lemon,
going.
lemon, 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 lemon,
Okay.
lemon, lemon.
I could keep you going. What did it feel like to be saying lemon at the end of that sequence?
It was just kind of like gobbledygook. It just felt weird and like I don't know. I was thinking of I don't know why, but like a car idling, like lemon, 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 lemon,
Yeah.
lemon, lemon.
Okay, so at the end, you're kind of noticing it as a noise.
Yeah,
And this will be true of any word, even with a word without sensory properties like lemon. If we repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, begins to lose some of its sense of meaning. And by the end, I'm wondering whether your mouth felt as acidic as it did at the beginning.
no, not at all. Completely forgot
No.
about that. Yeah.
Okay. So what we've done there, is by pure repetition. Arguably, one of the things we've done is focused your attention on the quality of the sound and, the act of articulating it at the expense of its associated learnt meaning. So by the end, it's just this weird noise that your mouth's making. And suddenly that same word isn't having the same effect.
Mm. I'm a fraud, 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 I'm a fraud. I
Well,
wonder how
yeah,
many listeners are we gonna lose if I just keep doing that?
it could be some sort of Radio 3 art installation thing. And although that seems like a weird thing to suggest, there are some exercises, we wouldn't do it for everything, but there's some exercises in certainly some approaches to act where we do literally that. Repetition or variations on repetition.
Mm.
So things like say it in a high-pitched voice. I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud. I encourage you to sing I'm a fraud to the tune of Happy Birthday to You. Take it away, Rich.
I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud. I'm a massive fraud, I'm a fraud, I'm a fraud.
There we go. There we go.
So that just makes me laugh, right?
Yeah, which is a sort of slightly incompatible state with fundamental self-doubt. And we're not attempting to disprove anything.
Mm.
We're not sort of stacking up the evidence that you're great at your job. What we're
Mm.
doing is we're drawing attention to, no, this was language. This was language, and language can be emitted in a high pitch, low pitch, to a tune. Yeah. And this can be effective for some things. And as people who are newer to this might instantly be spotting, okay, and we've probably got to be a little bit careful with it.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be disrespectful to the importance of that thought to the person. So we need to be really clear what the function of doing this is. It's not to say, oh, it's just laughable, isn't it? No, that's not what it is. It's just drawing attention
Yeah.
to the fact that here is language.
Do you know, this reminds me, I did something similar recently with, well, I was with a group of CBT trainees, and we were talking about alternative approaches to thought. And someone was kind enough to volunteer, and because I asked for an uncomfortable thought, and this person talked about the fact that their parents were on holiday, and they'd noticed himself worrying about them, like, dying in a plane crash.
Mm.
And so this teaching was online, and so what I did was I wrote it on a Word document, wrote,
Oh, yeah.
"My parents are gonna die in a plane crash," and I invited the person to talk about, like, what if you were in some kind of nightmare where you're wandering down the street and this was just flashing up on billboards everywhere, like, what would it look like? And so they were able to describe, well, it would be capital letters, Times New Roman,
Of course.
huge, red, with a couple of exclamation marks. And so we got it out like this, and so it looked really scary, and then they were getting into the sort of fear of it. And then as we were speaking, I just changed it. So I made it pink. I made it really small, like put a 0.8, lowercase, Comic Sans.
I knew you were going to
And
say Comic Sans.
and then so they just started laughing. They started laughing as I was doing this, and I'm like, so I just invited them. Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing at the idea your parents are going to die in a plane crash? And it was the same kind of thing. It's like, well, if you can manipulate it that easily, then
Yeah.
maybe let's not take it quite so seriously. Thanks, mind, for reminding me that I care about my parents.
Yeah.
And just like you were talking about with the person with a short time left to live, like, this is not something I need to concern myself with right now. Right? It's sort of unhelpful for my mind to be hijacking me with this concern, because there's absolutely nothing I can do about, I can't influence events on the other side of the world wherever my parents are. So, like, yes, maybe it's useful to be reminded that you care about your parents' well-being, but that's about as far as it goes. Beyond that,
Yeah.
to be obsessing over the idea that might happen is distressing and just unwelcome and unhelpful.
Good exercise.
Okay.
I've not done the font change thing.
So having said we were going to deal with that really quickly, we've spent ages on it, but the other sort of category of things I think is just undermining the literality of language. And let's just pick one thing here, which is inviting people to disobey their mind on purpose. So, and you can do this with, I think, just in quite basic ways. So, I've invited people to raise their right hand whilst saying out loud, "I cannot raise my right hand," as a way of kind of illustrating that it's possible to think something and then behave completely differently.
Mm.
And so once people understand the idea of that, then they can kind of practice that. This is like the idea of mentally changing a font. I mean, we physically changed the font on the screen, but what I invited that person to do was then, well, this is like a portable exercise that you can do any time. And then the next time you get upset by the thought about your parents dying, you could just imagine the font change. So in the same way, you can do this kind of same thing, right? You can practice doing something that goes against the thought that you're having. So
Yeah.
I can't possibly go to the supermarket whilst going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Or I can't possibly get this. What did you say? I'll never finish this?
I'll never finish this piece of work.
Yeah, I'll never
Yeah.
finish this piece of work whilst finishing this piece of work.
Nice. And again, it's funny, isn't it? We often talk about things can kind of look the same but have different functions.
Yeah.
And at one level, that looks like a way of disproving the reality of something to yourself. Whereas actually what you're doing is you're just pointing out, no, this bit is the language.
Yeah.
Kind of the reality or the world that it points to is other than that. But this bit is language. And when this language shows up, it's not the same as the reality showing up. The language of I can't go to the supermarket is not the not going to a supermarket, because here I am going to a supermarket.
That's right.
The language is different.
So, like, the next time you notice, oh, I'm never going to get this piece of work done, you could disobey on purpose and, go and spend 10 minutes doing it to kind of illustrate to yourself that it's possible to have this thought whilst doing the thing that it says you can't do.
Nice. I shall remember that tomorrow when I'm back on that piece of work, telling myself I can't finish it.
You can send me a tenner in the post. That's a bit old school. You probably just do a bank transfer now, right? I can't show my face. So the third category, which I think is probably where lots of ACT therapists spend their time, is in a set of exercises that help people create some distance between themselves and the thought they're having. It's a hard thing to talk about, but if I imagine, I could say, for example, like I'm the thinker, not the thought. There's a separation between me and the thought. And so there's various exercises that can help us do that, which I think might be useful to just spend a little time on. If you were to pick one from that group, what would you say would be your go-to?
I suppose my real go-to one is noticing that distinction between the thought and I'm having the thought. And going back to writing the thought down, maybe on a piece of paper, I'll never finish this piece of work, say, and having a good look at the thought, noticing what its impact is on me, and then above it on the piece of paper, writing, I have the thought that I'm never going to finish this piece of work. And then sort of reading that whole sentence, possibly several times, so that we've moved from the thought to the recognition that I have the thought. And over time and with practice, we can go another level out from that to get to the point of, I notice I'm having the thought, I'll never finish this piece of work. So using, in this case, as a pen and paper as the prop, for actually kind of physically representing, here's a thought, and now here's my recognition that I have this thought, and now here's me noticing I'm having the thought in this moment. So by doing that as a demonstration within either a teaching session or a therapy session, that kind of builds that skill. But then the key bit is getting the person to do it out with the session and building that as a skill that you pick up during the day by taking away those bits of paper and looking at them daily, maybe for often recurring thoughts. I think that's one of my kind of favorite, not just demonstration, but practical sort of skills building approaches.
Again, very portable. You could start by physically writing it. I think this is nice because I don't think I do this enough with people, but actually writing it rather than just talking about it probably has an additional bit of coding that you're doing in your brain there, isn't it? That you're not just thinking about it, you're physically writing. So it's from a sensory perspective, you're seeing it, actually physically creating the distance, taking this thought from rattling around in your head and committing it to a piece of paper and then doing those prefixes. So I'm having this thought that, and then I'm noticing that I'm having this thought that. Like very portable, you could easily do that on a piece of paper. But of course, then you could get to the point where you don't need the paper anymore. You can just do that. You can rehearse that in your head, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That should become, at least, I was going to say second nature, but certainly available to you. Particularly if we do the other work with that is about spotting when we're doing this. So for instance, if it's a thought that often happens, how do you know when it shows up? Do you notice a mood shift under certain circumstances? Does it always happen when you walk into a certain context? Setting up those kind of canaries in the cage that say, hang on, I'm in that situation, aren't I? Right, so I'm having the thought that, and here's me noticing I'm having the thought that. Then it absolutely can become not just a one-off, oh, I get it now, insight moment in therapy, but it becomes a practical hands-based skill that people take forward in their lives.
The old cliche, how do you get to the Royal Albert Hall? Practice, practice, practice.
Very good. What would you say is one of your go-tos?
Well, there's a few. I suppose one that just feels like a bit of an ACT classic. I don't know whether I always name it as Passengers on the Bus, but that's kind of the original idea. I might just use the spirit of it without using those words, but it's a metaphor, isn't it? Passengers on the bus. The idea that, well, let's use your example if you wouldn't mind. Like,
Absolutely.
So you have got a project that you want to get finished. So I want you to imagine that you're the kind of driver of a bus, and like the destination boards that they have on the fronts of buses. Would you be able to say like why you want to get this project finished? What's the kind of value that underpins it all?
I want to be helpful.
Okay.
I think if I complete it, it might be helpful to some other people. Therefore, I want to be helpful.
Right. So this is like the helpful bus, right? That you're driving, and the destination is getting the project finished. So we're driving this helpful bus towards getting this project finished. Now, that would be like really straightforward if you could just drive that bus to that destination and it was just a smooth journey. But from what you've already said, it's like it's not entirely smooth, this journey. So within this metaphor, what we're going to imagine is that there are some passengers on the bus who are giving you a hard time about getting to the destination. So we've certainly got this one passenger that keeps jumping up and shouting to you as the driver, "You'll never get to the end of this project." But out of interest, are there any other sort of difficult passengers that come along with that one?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's lots. Who do you think you are?
Right.
Who do you think you are to be doing this thing and telling people how to do stuff? So there's another passenger, jumps up and shouts that. There are more important things you could be doing. There's that one as well. Yeah, there's a whole crowd of them.
Yeah. So I'd like you to imagine a scenario where so you're driving the bus towards sort of destination, finished project, and there's this kind of cacophony in the back of like, who do you think you are? Really? This? Of all the things you could be doing, you'll never get this done, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. There's a massive noise in the back and you're trying to drive. What's the immediate sort of urge?
I mean, the major urge is to yell at them to shut up.
Okay.
Just tell them to shut up. Yeah.
Yeah. Whilst you're driving, or do you stop the bus first?
Well, I mean, given I'm probably going to have to turn around to do the shouting, I probably need to stop the bus to prevent a crash.
Okay, so you stop the bus, you turn around, maybe you even get up. You're quite a tall,
Yeah, yeah.
imposing man. You could go down the aisle, listen here,
Yeah.
and you could give
Throw
them
some of that excess weight around. Yeah.
give them a stern talking to. What do you imagine happens in that situation?
Oh, well, I know what happens. Exactly the same as always happens. Whenever I try and tell them to shut up and tell them, look, I am going to do this. It's important, blah, 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 blah. They get louder.
Right.
And they get more insistent.
Yeah. So that's not really an argument that you're going to win. They've come prepared with evidence as to why their views are the right ones. Strikes me the other thing is like the bus is going nowhere right in this moment.
Oh, it stopped.
Yeah. Do you ever succumb to the other thing which people often say when we go through this metaphor, which is, well, I'll just do what they say. If I stop working on the project, then everything goes quiet, and that's lovely, nice.
Oh, I've done that.
Yeah.
I have several major unfinished projects that I've done exactly that. Yeah.
Go and put your feet up, Ray. Just give it a rest. Go and watch TV or something. Go and eat some mushrooms.
Yeah.
Go and do something that you'll actually like doing. So it's almost like doing a deal with them, right? It's like, well, okay, if I just do what you say, will you just leave me alone?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Which always feels to me like slightly better than the other one, because it's a bit more peaceful, but still, right? You're not being helpful, so you're not driving the bus. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, my experience of that is it feels good in the short term. Like there's an immediate relief to, oh, thank God. I can give up, I don't have to plow on with this. It's in the longer term that you begin to resent it and think, oh, but it would have been nice to do that.
Yeah. It's like the old thing of going for the smaller sooner reward over the larger later one. Yeah. And so I guess I know that you know the kind of punchline of this, but so how do you manage then? What's the kind of other strategy that you use to manage this difficult situation?
I mean, what I end up doing is kind of nodding along and saying, I know, I see you, I know you. I kind of also know where you're coming from. I recognize that these passengers, they actually aren't my enemy. They're trying to protect me from stuff often. The passenger that says, you'll never finish this, wants me not to burn out and overwork. It's just giving me really bad advice about how to go about that. So I'm not going to get into a fight with it, but equally not going to listen to it. So what's my strategy in the end is, yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying. Thanks for trying to look out for me. And I'm just gonna keep driving. I accept that you're on here because all the other options of trying to get rid of you or give in to you are worse. So I'm just going to keep going, even with you chipping away in my ear.
That's the acceptance option, right? Which is just, you can shout and holler as much as you like. Thanks for that. And I'm just going to turn my attention to driving the bus towards finishing the project. I think what sort of fascinates me is how often, or I'll speak to myself, like I don't pick that option first. I end up there usually, but yeah, there's all sorts of jumping through hoops I do first, and wouldn't it be good if we could all just remember to just pick the acceptance option right from the start?
Well, yeah, and I think going for acceptance prematurely in the face of things being wrong, and I'm talking more about the external world now, but, I think there is a moment internally and externally just to say, hang on, is there a way of removing some of this stuff? And often in the internal world, there really isn't. But it's like in the external world, sometimes we have to accept that things are not right and not fair. However, we shouldn't rush straight to that, because if we spot that things are not right and not fair, we really should be trying to do something about it. We may have to do some acceptance, but I don't think we should rush straight to that kind of acceptance. It's a different kind of acceptance to accept this is the way it is now, what do I need to do about it? That kind of acceptance we can go to straight away, because that doesn't prevent action.
That's a fair point. Yeah, nice discrimination there between accepting of stuff within and without. All right. Well, I think that's a whistle-stop tour of fusion and diffusion, but I feel like we've done that justice. Anything you'd want to add that we've not covered?
No, other than to say, as with many of these things, it's a complicated area. There's a lot of stuff that seems very abstract to start off with. So the language attached to it is a lot more abstract than, say, the language attached to Apple. So we do have to be a little careful sometimes to simultaneously say, we're talking about fusion and defusion. We've talked about all this stuff. So those words, they're talking about this stuff. There's that level of using the language. Sometimes it can get a bit confusing that people use the word defusion to mean different components of this. They can talk about defusion as a goal, or defusion as an exercise, or defusion as a process. That's not necessarily a problem. It's just, if you're getting into this stuff, it's worth knowing how you're using the language and understanding, is this a target, a change in behavior we're looking for? Or are we using the word to reflect the kind of exercise that we've talked about? It's okay to use the same word around, as long as we can narrow and become more specific when we need to.
Yeah, that's a helpful reminder. Yeah, we have a lot of therapists that listen to this podcast. So if you're a therapist, that last bit is useful advice, I think, just to be clear on your use of terminology. If you're not a therapist and you just want to find some helpful ways of trying to break free from the prison that your thoughts sometimes build for you, then you don't need to worry about that kind of stuff, and you can just try some of those exercises that we've talked about. Okay, so we are going to switch things up for season 3. We have decided. Well, I've decided. I'm just bored of talking to you, Ray. I'm just me and you.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
It's getting old. No,
As
not
am
at all.
I.
We thought we just in the interest of keeping things fresh, we would have a season of podcasts. We'll try it for a season and see how it goes, where we invite guests along. So it will be at least a 3-way conversation. The idea is to get people who have been using acceptance and commitment therapy or other types of contextual behavioral science and applying those in different ways, different areas. And so have a series where we kind of interview guests to get their wisdom on a particular topic. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Very much so. Very much so. Because obviously we're getting to pick who we ask. And if they're kind enough to say yes, we're getting to invite some people that we both kind of respect and admire. We know they're going to do good work. And not only am I optimistic that it should produce an interesting podcast, I really want to have the conversation anyway with these folks. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
So we're still in the process of booking these guests, but just to give you a quick sneak peek, I can tell you that we are going to do an episode on AI and ACT. Help me out, Ray. What else have we got booked?
How these kind of approaches can help in school settings with people who are sometimes struggling in the educational system.
Physical health. We've got someone who's going to talk to us about using ACT in physical health settings.
We're going to be looking at some of the complexities and pressures around how people feel about their own body and their own appearance with a specialist in that area.
And then we're going to have a couple of episodes, one looking at two, both looking at the kind of therapeutic relationship and therapy in general. So one from a therapist perspective, thinking about like how can you conduct yourself as a therapist in order to be useful to your clients? And then we are going to talk to someone who's had therapy to think about what do they want from a therapist. That's a bit of a sneak peek of some of the stuff we've got lined up. So you'll have to bear with us. Give us a little while to record those episodes, and then we'll try and get those out once a month, probably, for the rest of this year.
Excellent.
Anyway, without further ado, one bit of this podcast that we're not going to change is Let's Ask Ray. So, you ready?
As ready as I ever am.
Let's go and ask Ray, shall we?
What is the most useless fun fact stuck in your brain forever?
I'm struggling.
No fun facts. It's just all stuff about mushrooms.
Everything's useful. that's the half of the request.
I don't believe that for a second.
Okay. I don't know if it's useless, but it's just there's not many practical implications of this. But it's the fact that when you look at a tortoise, the outside bit, it's not like a shell that contains the creature. I mean, the shell is the creature. All of that stuff's full inside. His spine goes along the inside of the it's not spine equivalent, it goes along the inside of the shell. That's really weird. That's not what I imagined at all.
So you can't take a tortoise out of its shell?
No, don't try. Important tip. What about you, Rich?
I'm often winding my partner up by not remembering everyday stuff that's actually important to remember, but then being a mine of information when it comes to stuff that's largely pretty inconsequential. So I don't know whether I've got fun facts, but I've got lots of facts about like football in the 1970s or Star Wars. I've just got lots of facts about stuff that's not really of interest to anybody other than me. I'm not sure that they're really fun. They'd be fun if I was in a room with other people who were interested in that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure me and you could have some pretty in-depth conversations about science fiction that would just bore everyone to tears. So I think I'm full of that kind of stuff. We have sometimes on air, yeah. But yeah, I'm not sure about fun. But yeah, I do certainly have a lot of space in my head, it would seem, for inconsequential facts.
What's interesting to me at the moment, Rich, is, and this is a weird cognitive function thing, I know there are 2 or 3 things here that are brilliant examples in my head. I can see the niche. I can see the shelf that they're on in my head, and I can't get them. There's a couple of things that are just beautiful examples of that. Something about, this is the origin of that. Or the person who wrote this actually created that. I know that there are things there. I can see the shape of the facts. And at this moment, I just can't access it. And that's actually quite interesting to think how that might work. That might be working in my head. How I can kind of be accessing it without being able to access it.
I also have things. So I just thought of one, but I've got a bunch of these that I don't even know whether they're true. So like I will happily tell people that, did you know the origin of Saved by the Bell? They used to bury people. And because, in the Christian church, there's this whole idea of Jesus rising from the dead after 3 days, that they used to put a little bell on the grave with a little piece of string down through the ground into the coffin. And so people could ring the bell if they woke up in that time. And then that's the origin of the phrase "saved by the bell." But I don't even know that's true.
I mean, it could be. I don't know whether that was the origin of the phrase, but that was a huge thing in Victorian times. And I've just read an absolutely fascinating book on death and mourning in Victorian Britain, because that's the kind of fun guy I am, called Rites of Passage. And that was a huge deal back then. And part of it was because of the American writer Edgar Allan Poe, who wrote a story about somebody being buried alive. And it kind of captured the public imagination so much that people started insisting on having a bell. So yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if that was the origin of it.
I'm going to have to just pick you up on something. You just said, that's the kind of fun guy I am.
That's the level of punning that's just become second nature.
You just cannot leave it alone. Well, on that bombshell, I think we should draw a close to this episode. So thank you very much, my friend. And I will see you and some guests in season 3. Take care.
I can't wait. See you then.